And we are live. Okay, so like I said before, I'll be waiting just a few minutes to let people get into the episode before we formally start. I know we already had a comment from whoever has the username AAA. I know you've interacted a lot before, so thank you for doing so. Yeah, so already have one person in, and we'll be starting in just a couple of seconds. So, hello, ladies and gentlemen of Vanderbilt and the entire YouTube world, and welcome to Terrier Talk Season 2, Episode 23. Now, before we start, I want to have a moment of silence for a very sad death in the sports world, that is Kobe Bryant. Now, I know not a Vanderbilt sports news thing, but I think it is important enough within the realm of sports to bring up here. So just a brief moment of silence for him on this episode here. Thank you for partaking in that with me. So on a lighter note, had a pretty good week just in general for sports this week, but for anyone who doesn't know who this person is next to me, I didn't really introduce him first. Welcome to the show, Ryan Rogers, a sophomore.
Thank you.
Welcome. Sophomore rotational player for the boys soccer team, and you've put in a lot of good stuff throughout this season, wherever you've been asked. And we talked about this a little bit beforehand, but I want you to talk about the progression, I guess, from last year to this year, and the different positions you've played, and how that happened.
Yeah, so towards throughout the whole season, my freshman year last year, I was playing a lot of attacker and winger, so more of the attacking third for the team. And so obviously it's a lot different now playing defender this year. So it's just been a lot of different type of schemes of things.
Mm-hmm.
You just kind of got to get a different mindset wherever you go.
Right.
It's always the mindset that you got to win the ball and obviously get off the field and score.
Right.
But when you're at defense, as I used to be an attacker, I've been playing attacker my whole life, though, it kind of is hard to kind of have that defensive mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of try to maintain
that.
Yeah,
it's two very different. I have a very cursory experience playing soccer, playing when I was younger. If I do have a little bit of an idea, it is two very different mindsets when you're playing offense versus defense. Even no matter what position you are playing, and when you're specifically trying to play defender, it is very different. And your technique is somewhat different. The way you play is different, and it's interesting that difference. And of course, you've been all around the field this year. You played attacker. You started a little bit of midfielder, playing some wing back now. But you had a brief part during the season where an injury forced you to take a starting position. How did that go, and that whole situation?
Okay, yeah. So this is before I even had any idea of me playing defender at the time. Mm-hmm. It was kind of just a quick jump start into playing defense. We were at the Copa tournament in Lafayette, and coach was kind of rotating a bunch of different people back there, and he called me up to go play defense. I was kind of startled, and I ended up getting an assist to Colin, and so coach thought that I was kind of right to kind of fill in until David came back from his injury, and then so I guess he just kind of trusted me back there at the time being. So like you said, I guess it was just for more of a depth thing,
right?
And just kind of for safety things, to where he had a player that he kind of already knew could play a little bit of defense.
Yeah. And that's something that trust is actually an interesting aspect here. And this is one thing I wanted to talk about in a little bit, but I'll bring it up now. I've had a couple of soccer players on before. I had James, I had Michael, I had Nick Marley just a couple episodes ago. They were all seniors, and obviously even a first-year head coach. And you brought up the fact, first-year head coach, difference in formation now, kind of was a large reason why you moved back from attacker to midfielder and eventually to wingback. But new head coach, even with that new head coach, there is a little bit of gravitation towards the seniors for that leadership and that trust, just naturally. So, but I find it very interesting that he does have that trust in you as a sophomore, a little bit of a younger player. But is there an interesting difference in perspective from how the season has gone between the seniors? I've gotten their perspective on a lot of it already, versus how you see the season. And win, lose, or draw, you end up, however the season goes, you'll have seasons after this. So is there anything different about that in your youth?
Yeah, because obviously, like you said, like the seniors, this is their last season, so every win is obviously a lot more taken. I mean, like every win is taken hard for the whole team, and like me and like the whole team, we're all very serious about the wins.
Mhm.
But I think it means a lot more to the seniors because, like you said, it's their last season. So, as a younger player, like in my perspective, I think that like we should try and give our all for the
Yeah.
seniors and give them that like a ring their last season, which we're striving for, and like from our perspective, just kind of looking up to them as like role models because they're a really good group of leaders. Each and every one of them are very good leaders,
Yeah,
leadership roles on the team.
They're all the leadership qualities from those players. I mentioned a lot of their names already from previous episodes. They're definitely respectable. They're people worth respecting and worth fighting for and playing for.
Yeah.
And again, I do want to bring this up with a first year head coach. The senior leadership is so important.
Yeah.
And that's not saying that you wouldn't respect the first year head coach, but it helps bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And I know that experience very well from football this year, being a senior on that football team with a first-year head coach, and we had a lot of success. So you guys are probably going to have a good bit more success than we did. The playoff game was important, the playoff win was important, but you guys are looking for a ring, and that's huge. But that difference is in the respectability from those players has probably been, and that's kind of what I'm taking from this, a large reason why you guys have had a success. You talk about how important each win is. You've gotten a lot of them.
Yeah.
You have so few losses. 15-2-8, I think, is the record right now. You could make the argument at 17-2-6 with the district overtime anyway. And I brought this up last week. This is a little bit tangential, but I brought this up last week, and I find it interesting. You guys have had so much success. You're the first seed. Lots of wins, very few losses, but with so many draws before last week is a little interesting because with the draws this week, I wanted to see how you would play in overtime and eventually in penalty kicks. Because you don't get that experience until district play and until the playoffs.
Yeah.
And a great team with so many draws, it's kind of an enigma. You don't really know how that's going to work, but you guys got the job done against a couple of very strong teams. Talk about a little bit of a weak play in one of the games, but two very good games, and you end up pulling up those victories. And that's great going forward and getting that experience. Again, is there anything about those two games in district? I don't remember both of them. It was against Noma and I think Pearl River. Yes. Is there anything about those two games and the overtime that's just different from the other draws? They're both technically draws, but is there anything different with those games?
I think we could have played a lot stronger in those two games. I don't think those games should have gone to overtime, but they did. And then I think once it reached like that overtime period, we just kind of realized we had to buckle down and get the job done. Even if it wasn't going to be counted as a win in district, it still meant a lot for us about like respectability.
Yeah, respectability, yes.
Yeah, just kind of like since we're the number one and everything, we kind of have to kind of hold our confidence and everything and kind of put some respect. So we gotta like we can't just kind of settle with a tie against like lower teams like that. And I can't settle with that.
Quickly, that's nothing against like Nova, for example. They'll be a rank outsider in your division, but I definitely understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Those games. One interesting thing you talked about the difference. Yes, they're technically draws, but you're still wanting to win because of the district results. I see you're looking. I will go ahead and again, I know this is kind of a non sequitur, but I'll go ahead and ask. One commenter asked, did it take you a while to get used to defender? He asked us a while ago when we were talking about the difference in positions. But did it take you any time really to get used to it?
Yeah, it was kind of like I still do this. I still kind of have a problem with this. Kind of like I said, I kind of have the attacking mindset coming from attacker to defender.
Do you get too aggressive at times?
Yeah, so I want the ball, and if I see space, I kind of try and take it sometimes. And sometimes I'll either result in a chance created or it'll result in a ball lost and a counterattack happening, which I have to work back for.
Right.
And yeah, I mean it took me a little while.
Yeah.
It took me a couple of games to kind of get used to it. But after it kind of got the groove in, kind of had to practice some stuff on my own on like just kind of different like techniques on how to not let people pass me. And obviously there's always going to be some times where people do get past you because nobody's perfect. But
make mistakes and you have to recover.
Yeah, so just kind of learn from my mistakes game after game. and I just try and better myself.
And my guess is with how much trust the coaches put in you, we talked about this before, but you've improved a lot from game to game. He wouldn't keep you there if you weren't improving, and if you weren't getting better, and if you weren't becoming more and more effective. And I think that's great. You've definitely proven to be a player that is worth having on the team, and worth not just having on the team, but worth playing. So congratulations for that. That's something to be proud of.
Thank you.
Okay, back to the original thing we were talking about with District and the game against. We talked about Pearl River. We talked about Noma. And last week you had the game, kind of the de facto district championship game against Archbishop Hannon. Ended up winning that game 4-1. Great win. But again, is there anything outside of the box score and who won and who got the goals that is of note, I guess is the best way to put it, from that game?
I think coming out of the Noma and Pearl River games, where obviously we didn't play as strong as we usually try to, I think it was just a big kind of response game to those.
Yeah.
And kind of making a statement out there that we still deserve that number one spot.
Yeah.
And that was still a contender for
Yeah, definitely. As the number one seed, there's a target on your back. There's a little bit more pressure at times.
Yeah.
And I've seen from some of the message boards people talking about, no, this team's going to have a better chance. This team's going to have a better chance. And with the 2 draws, there will be some doubters out there. And you guys settled a lot of that with that game. And I think that's really important. Especially among the other divisions, state big contenders, like, for example, Brother Martin. So I want to talk about this, and I'll talk about this later on. It will be the main event of the episode. But it's kind of interesting because on the surface, non-varsity games aren't things that I talk about that much.
Yeah.
But the junior varsity versus Brother Martin, I think the number one team, right, in the top division is. Am I wrong on that?
I don't really know. I know they're a top team in D1,
right,
but
and I know they're one of the favorites. But anyway, big team in one of the top divisions. You guys, of course, number one in Division 3. Do you think there's going to be, because again, JV games, usually you can't take that much from them moving forward in varsity, but do you think there's something that can be taken from this maybe in the future?
Yeah, I think because since we're losing so many seniors, a lot of those JV kids are going to have big roles on varsity next year. And like I said before, we have a very strong 8th grade class, and we have some good kids in 9th grade. And obviously the rotational players that play for varsity and JV in 10th grade are obviously very strong too. And I think they're gonna give Brother Martin a fight. And like you said, they're one of the top teams in D1. And I think that if we kind of buckle down and play with the composure that our JV team has played with a while, I think that we can definitely get that done.
Yeah. That's great. The difference, the how much that means for the future, because you guys tied them earlier this season. Am I correct on that?
We talked to you too.
That's what I remembered. I talked to James about this early in the week, but the Brother Martin game, you tied him this season, but that's much more important for the future and the outlook of maybe if you guys get a win here in the future with a win over Brother Martin, a win over some of the other teams that we've tied this season, we can be seen as not just in the future, not just the best team in the division, but the best team in the state.
Yeah.
That's something that, it's a big game for the future whole state outlook. It's like when the girls play State's Classic or Mount Carmel, and that has huge ramifications for the state, even if it doesn't have a big division state playoff implication that year. And that's something I find very interesting in that game. Have a few other games this week, of course, against Pope John Paul.
Yeah.
Pope St. Paul John, anyway. Pope John Paul against Lafayette High, Holy Cross. Is there anything of note from those games? I know you talked about before the Lafayette High game is pretty important itself, but outside of that, are there anything big from those games that you want to discuss? Any keys to victory potentially,
including Lafayette game?
Including Lafayette game.
Yeah, I think coming off of that Hannon game, just keep that same mentality that we have to hold on one spot and kind of.
There's no down game for you guys.
Yeah, no. From now, it just has to go up because approaching playoffs, we just got to keep going up from here. If we even slouch a little bit, there's there's so much pressure. I know what you're saying.
Even
though there were no. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm kind of losing my
No, it's okay.
Even though we're the number one seed, there's no 100% chance. There's nothing guaranteed.
Right.
Because last year we were the 8th seed and we ended up knocking out number one St. Louis. So obviously crazy things happen.
Yes.
And it's all about the mentality and the heart you have for the game. because like we can't get too comfortable in games. Because for example, we get too comfortable against teams that like Pearl River and Noma and stuff like that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So we cannot get comfortable against any of these teams. We just have to keep working hard and resting as well, and the chances that we have, and staying hydrated, eating good.
And I think that's sorry, did I cut you off? Is there anything? Okay. I think there is one interesting thing you mentioned from that is important moving forward, especially with your role on the team. You're not actually a starter, but you're a very important rotational player. You want to make sure everyone's at 100% going into playoffs, and you don't want to just play all of the starters all of the time. And I think your role is going to be very important in that. Getting, you mentioned Stephen Capel, you mentioned David before, getting them the rest they need in order that not just you, but all three of you are going to be 100% going into those really big games in state.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's always going to be a target on your back. You're the number one seed. Everyone wants to knock you off, even if it doesn't mean a district championship anymore for international or even the games outside of that, like across Lafayette, Pope Jean Paul. They still want to knock you off because that game is seen as huge. That would be a huge program-defining win for a lot of those teams. I know Lafayette's a very good team, but even them, big games for all of them, and so you're going to get their best every single time, and you have to play to your best. You guys already kind of, I don't want to say missed that, but you lost out on that from the Noma game, from the Pearl River game. And I think you guys learned that a lot from because of Hannon. But yeah, you said it. Just need to keep up that momentum and have the momentum going into the big games, those state playoff games, and make sure what happens to you in, say, the quarterfinals isn't the same thing that what happened to St. Louis last season.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of talk in the comment section since the last time we addressed it. I don't play FIFA. Sorry, Eli. Yes, we did see that Kobe died early on in the episode. We had a moment of silence for him. But yes, that's obviously very sad, very unfortunate occurrence, and I feel bad for his whole family. Okay, so I don't think anything else there is needing to be addressed. So I think. Is there anything else you want to add to the future? Any future games? Anything before that you want to talk about?
Not anything I can really think of at the moment.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure having you. Thank you. Okay. So, again, thank you to Ryan just adjusting the camera and stuff so it focuses better with one person on. I know there are some people talking about other. Oh, yes, that would be important. Some other people that I'm not sure. I don't know the validity of any of that. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Anyway, we're gonna move on to some other sports. I think we've covered boys soccer pretty much in full for both the review and the preview. Although I will mention one thing at the very end of the episode at the main event. But outside of that, I think I've talked about everything for boys soccer with Ryan. Again, thank you to him for coming on the show. Obviously, I enjoyed it a lot, and I think hearing from some of the younger players at times is very useful, and it's a nice kind of change of perspective, like I mentioned in the interview with him. I think it's always very important. And I'll talk about some of the youth later on, kind of peppered in throughout the episode, especially in basketball, and I'll talk about that later. Excuse me. So, starting with the review for, we talked about boys soccer. Girls soccer, I'm somehow going to spend less time on that than I did boys soccer in this section because there's not much to talk about. 2 beatdowns this week. District for girls soccer is maybe the most boring stretch of a few weeks to talk about for this show for any sport, because even when other teams are dominant in what they're doing, there's still more to talk about. Like girls tennis went undefeated last season until state, but there were still interesting things to talk about. A big win against St. Thomas More, this, that, whatever it was, still interesting. Our girls cross country, interesting things to talk about. Girls track, great things to talk about. Volleyball, even when they're dominating different teams in their district, it's not nearly as formulaic, I guess I'll say, as what it seems to be for girls soccer. I mean, there is no competition from what I've seen. 8-0 mercy roll, 8-0 mercy roll, 8-0 mercy roll, beat down, beat down, beat down. There is just not much to discuss here. And I'm sorry to any big girl soccer fans that are watching this that would rather hear more about it. It's just, I'm sorry, there's not that much to talk about. You guys are doing great. Obviously, it's not really a bad thing. I guess in a lot of ways it is a very good thing. But yeah, it's not very interesting to discuss. It's probably a fun game to watch if you're a Vanderbilt fan. No matter who we're playing in district, it feels like they're just the same also rans, no matter who it is. Kind of lost track of who we're playing. Well, I'm going to have it down, but it seems to not matter very much. Whether we're there, whether we're away, we're just dominating everyone. And yeah, it's just not very interesting. Not really, I'm not mad about it or anything. Obviously, it's great for girls soccer to be dominating everyone like this, but not much to discuss other than the fact that there isn't much to discuss, I guess. Moving on to basketball, where we have a lot to talk about with just the 4 district games for both boys and girls. One quick note before we really get into it. The boys and girls basketball games until the final week of district will be talked about in tandem. I'm going to go day by day instead of game by game for them, or sport by sport for them. Like, for example, this week, we had 2 home games for each team, the South Lafourche games on Tuesday and the Ellender games on Friday. And for South Lafourche on Tuesday, I'm going to talk about both South Lafourche games and then both Ellender games. It just makes a little bit more sense with the games, since I'm going to be at all of the games now, and I'm seeing them for each day. And that's kind of how I'm watching the games, even if so that's kind of how it is in my mind, and it's organized from day to day. I think that'll make more sense. So starting with Tuesday for basketball, I'll start with the girls, and it was exactly what I thought it was going to be. So the South Lafourche game was a very physical game. 2 teams that, again, don't like each other very much. So much physicality. Banging up at each other. The second half had 30 fouls in it. And part of that is the fact that the refs were a little bit ticky-tack. But another part of it is the fact that it was a very physical game. I'm not one to talk a lot about when I get a prediction, right? When I talk about, like, the week before and I say something's going to happen and then it happens. I don't like bringing that up a lot. But I do think it's interesting to discuss here, because I said that both the boys and the girls games were going to be very physical. And I was right on that. They were. The girls' game had 52 fouls in it, 30 in the second half. That is absolute physicality, and every foul mattered. Because just like the Terrier game back in early December, many big players were in foul trouble. Brittany fouls out with about 6 minutes, I think, left to go in the game. They have a couple players foul out. I think one of our players almost fouls out. I think at one point on the court there were 6 different players. Of the 10 that were on the court, there were 6 different players that had 4 fouls on the court, with 1 foul changing the entire dynamic of the game. And the game itself was not just a physical, I don't want to say beauty, but a physical, entertaining game to watch because of how physical it was. It was fun, and it was so close the entire time. We make a run, they make a run. The lead is trading back and forth. We end up trailing for most of the second half just by about 2 to 3, 4, up to 6 points. Battling back, shot for shot, blow for blow. We can't quite take the lead. And then the biggest moment of the game happens. We get a layup to go up by 1 point, 54. I think it was 54-53. I excuse the lighting change, but I think it was 54-53. They get the ball with about a minute to go. And, remember, this is South Lafourche we're talking about. They're going to travel extraordinarily well to this game, and they did. The boys' team was cheering the girls' team on. The stands, it was packed. Not just with South Lafourche fans, but with a lot of Vanderbilt fans. Thank you to everyone that came out to that game. It was a great game to watch, and they got their money's worth for both the boys and the girls. But I'm talking about the girls, of course, right now. Just a phenomenal game. It was so entertaining. But that big moment, we take the lead. Everyone is on their feet. Huge moment. South Lafourche gets the ball. If we can get the ball back, we can control the clock and potentially come out with a win, a huge district win, because the ramifications of this game are huge on Tuesday night. Last week, of course, we lost to Assumption by almost 30 points. We got our first loss in district. Not the end of the world, of course, because we will play everyone twice. But that Friday, South Lafourche played Assumption, and South Lafourche beat Assumption, which is huge. If we win this game, there is a 3-way tie for first place in the district at that point. And a little addendum here, this district is one of the deepest in the entirety of the state. It probably is the single best, just from top to bottom, district in all of girls basketball. Last season, every single team made the playoffs, and I think every single team other than South Lafourche made top 20 in their playoff division. We made out top 20. Like, everyone got a playoff win, got to top 16 or top 20, whatever it was, and played. Everyone's playing at a great level, and everyone is very successful. South Terrebonne's a top 20 team. Elder's a top 20 team. South Lafourche is just right there. Morgan City was last year. Assumption, obviously, is always great, and we are right there, both last year and this year. And it is no different right now. So this might be the most entertaining district to watch, because I bet you that South Lafourche Assumption game was very good. And this game was no different. Coming down to the wire with huge district implications. 1 minute left to go in the game. We're covering hard their best player. She kicks it out top of the key to, I think it was number 1 for South Lafourche. Not the best player on the team, but the best shooter. She gets a partially open look. We go to defend it. She takes the shot, and the entire court freezes. I mean, it felt like that shot lasted in the air, had a hang time of about 8 seconds. That shooter already has a really high arch on her shot, really high trajectory, and it felt so much bigger at that moment. South Lafourche down 1 with a shot that will change the entire momentum of the game, because points were not very easy to come by. Brittany's out. Now, Brittany's not her best scorer, Amy is, but Brittany still kind of is a spark on that team. She's out, and coming by points, getting points is not very easy. And if they score here, it's huge, and they probably run with the game. Kicks it out, gets to the top of the key. Their best shooter shoots. The entire stadium freezes as it's in the air. It's coming in. I see Coach Coleman leaning back to see it. It's coming in and goes in. Nothing but net. Which in the district, I guess within this district, is kind of the legendary moment of the game, and is probably one that I will remember for a long time. South Lafourche does end up, they don't look back. We don't get the lead back. And they end up winning, I think, 61-56. And it's an unfortunate loss, of course. Obviously, I don't want our team to lose. But the game was worth the price of admission. It was great. It was fun. It was interesting. And I loved watching it. We didn't come out on top, of course, but the game was so entertaining. And that's why I love watching sports. The story of the game, the interest of all of that. That's what I love. And the boys' game was very similar. Because of the South Lafourche Assumption game, and because of how much, for the girls, the South Lafourche Assumption game, and for the boys, how much our record in going into the game, of course, was 4-17, and South Lafourche has been much more successful. Going into the game, both teams were favored to win by 15, 20-ish points, and that didn't happen. Of course, I just talked about the girls' game. South Lafourche only comes out on top by 5, trailing with a minute to go in the game. Great game. A lot closer than what people thought. The boys' game, very similar. We're battling, also very physical, goes on forever, so many fouls. We're battling. We're tied, we're down by 3, we're tied, we're up by 2 at halftime, which is huge. And I'm thinking the whole time, after the St. Charles game where we come up just short, after the Point Compete game where we come up just short, after the West St. John game where we come up just short, I'm thinking in my head, how are we going to mess it up? Because the entirety of the second half, for the first quarter and a half of the second half, the entire third quarter, and the first 4 or 5-ish minutes of the fourth quarter, we are in the lead. We're keeping this lead. We're scoring. We're holding on to the ball, having long possessions. We're doing everything we need to do to get a huge district victory. Unlike the girls who started last week, the boys started this week. This was the first district game for us. And to start out on top 1-0 would be huge. And the whole time I'm kind of pessimistic. I'm thinking, how are we going to mess it up? How are we going to mess it up? What's going to happen? And what eventually happens, I can't say I'm surprised, but it's unfortunate to see happen. We're tied at this point. South Lafourche does tie up the game. South Lafourche has 6 fouls, so one more for them would be the bonus. Seth Ponsant at this point has 4 fouls, and one more would foul out. So there's a scrum for the ball near the back corner. South Lafourche, they get to it, like we get to it first. They foul Seth, and then Seth does something and draws a tech, which is a cluster of a situation for a basketball official. What ends up, there are a lot of talking points for that moment in particular that I need to discuss. So if I'm jumping back and forth from a few things, I apologize in advance. So the first thing is just the interesting rule sets of that situation. So they get the foul. So they get fouled. And that means it's a 1-and-1 shot for Seth. However, Seth got a tech at the same time, like within that dead ball, which means not only he gets a tech, so they get free throws, but also, and of course the possession afterwards, but also he's out because it's his 5th foul. So it's his 5th foul. The refs are talking about this for a long time, which is what makes it kind of interesting. A lot of the fans were actually surprised, weren't really sure what the deal was. Seth comes in. He has to leave the game, of course, and someone needs to shoot the free throws, but the person who needs to shoot the free throws is the person who subbed in for Seth. Initially, we had that as Evan, and that was a little bit of a cluster itself, trying to figure that out. But initially, we had that as Evan, and Coach Ezel makes a really interesting choice, and I think it's something that's very valuable in the long run. He takes the timeout, burns a really important timeout. We only had like 2 left at this point. Burns a really important timeout to, at least from my perspective, maybe there was something else going on, there was another reason to do this, but from my perspective, the biggest reason that he did this was to get a different sub to be shooting the free throws, because at first he didn't realize that the person who was subbing in would have to shoot the free throws. So he burns a timeout and subs in Alex Castell to shoot the free throws instead. It's a 1-and-1, of course. So I want to talk about that decision and why I'm such a huge fan of that decision. And that's not because I doubt Evan as a free throw shooter. He might be watching this, and I would say this whether he is or not. He is a very good free throw shooter, and he's proven himself. I think he was 1 for 2 from the line that day. Alex hadn't shot a free throw yet, I don't think. So it wasn't because Evan's a terrible free throw shooter and Alex is a much better one. I don't think that's the motive behind this decision. I think the motive behind the decision is the future of the team. Because putting your trust, I talked about it a lot with Ryan here, another younger player, putting your trust in a big star freshman that is, Alex Castell is actually very similar to Ryan in his role on the team. He, of course, plays the first 3-ish quarters of JV, then he dresses out for varsity. He's kind of our 6th man. Doesn't usually start anymore, but still gets very important rotational playing time. And the development of him in the future is going to be huge for us come his junior, senior year and the success that we can have. Because the future of this team can be very bright. And a large reason for that might be this decision. Because Coach Ezel put his trust, we talked about the importance of trust, of course, in the young freshman, in Alex Castell. And that point is so important. Will, you bring that up? I'm going to talk to some 8th graders this week. My plan is to have an 8th grader on the show next week. So I need to find a way to contact you guys. That was my intention this week, but I didn't have a chance to contact you guys. We'll see how that works out, but that is my intention right now, to have an 8th grader on next week. So, Coach Ezel puts his trust in Alex to shoot the free throws, and Alex is a very good free throw shooter. And he ends up missing them. He misses the front end of the 1-and-1, and then the South Lafourche guy who takes the technical free throws hits both of them. They get the inbound, and they end up, because of that, winning the game by 4. And I'll talk about the ramifications of that and the importance of why that happened and what we need to work on in the future. But first, this. And Alex, he ends up missing, but that's not really what's important. In the future, what's important is that Coach Ezel trusts him, and that action, much more important than any words Coach Ezel could tell him, is indicative of the fact that he trusts him, and it shows Alex that he trusts him. Alex, there's a fair chance you're watching this. Take that from that moment on Tuesday. Don't just ignore the fact that you missed the free throws for the most part. I'll talk about that in a minute, but ignore the fact that you missed the free throws in the long run. It's not a don't be disappointed in that. Be proud of the fact that Coach Ezel trusted you. He'll do that in the future, I assume. And just have confidence in that. Be proud of yourself for that. And have that confidence in the future. He sees what you're doing. You're working hard. You're doing everything you can. Trust in that and have confidence. So that's just a kind of a message from me to you. So to everyone else who might be watching this, Alex does end up missing the free throw. Their big man, number 14 for South Lafourche, he hits both their free throws. We had a tech earlier on in the quarter where he hit both free throws. And we end up losing the game by 4. The difference in the game, the 2 techs. I don't know exactly what Seth did. I don't know if it was deserving of a tech or not. It's not really my place to say. But just, I guess in the future, we need to be more careful of that. That the technical foul is huge within a game. And we need to be wary of that because those 4 free throws, that was the difference. We lost by 4. The guy hit all 4 free throws. And that's a large reason why we have this statistic, which is staggering. Number 14 for South Lafourche went 9 for 10 from the free throw line in the 4th quarter, which is a stat line that is absurd and that I've never heard before. 9 free throw makes in a 4th quarter in 1 quarter is crazy from one player. He's obviously a great free throw shooter, and that's the point that I want to make. South Lafourche not just has one guy that they can lean on, they have a few good free throw shooters that they can lean on as great free throw shooters. We have gotten in a lot of close games this year, and if we can hit all of our free throws, we can win them. We end up losing this game, but if we can hit all of our free throws, we can win those games, and that is what's going to be the difference in the future. So to Alex and everyone else, Evan and everyone else on the basketball team, keep practicing those free throws. Keep shooting them. Get better and better and better at it, and don't miss in the game. Because that's the difference between winning and losing in a lot of these games. The teams that win close games like this hit all of their free throws, and the teams that lose don't. That is the biggest key to winning a game like that. And I think that's going to be huge in the future when we play a team like South Terrier, and I'll talk about that later. So that was a lot for one day and 2 events. Hopefully this next thing with Ellender, we're still in the review portion. I know we're almost 40 minutes in. I'll try to speed up a little bit. Sorry. Against Ellender, not as much to talk about, but starting with the girls' game, a theme of this episode has been youth, and I think there's one other thing here to address with the girls' basketball game against Ellender on Friday. Now, Ellender has an amazing girls basketball program. They won the state championship just a few years ago, and the only player that's still there for Ellender from that team is I think it was 25, Tanisha Hester. Big man, big girl, I guess. I don't know, but she is their post player. But she has such good court vision for a post player. She understands that position so well. She was on that state championship team, I think, back in 2017. But for a post player, she is like deceptive quickness, and she played incredibly well. But I don't even think she was the best player on the team for Ellender. Their best player was a freshman. It's a very young roster for Ellender. Jamia Singleton, number 4. And I mentioned the name because I think it's a name you'll want to remember in the future if you're a Vanderbilt fan and you want to watch a lot of Ellender games. Because she's their point guard. And probably our future point guard, number 4, Jimmy Detillier, is also a freshman. And they had a few interesting interactions within this game already as freshmen, And I think from the 7 other games they'll be playing in their career against each other, I think that is in the future something that'll be very interesting to see because they'll get obviously tons of playing time. Demi is now as a freshman with 11 seniors in front of her, and Jimmy is their best player. So I think be ready to see that matchup if you're a future fan or even a present fan, obviously, that will watch in the future to pay attention to that because I think that'll be very interesting to see. They're not exactly the same skill set of player, but they're around the same size. They probably will stay around the same size at the same age, of course. And I think that'll be interesting. Jimmy's a little bit more physical. Jimmy might have a little bit more court vision, but very interesting to see that difference in what might be 2 big team leaders come their senior year or even junior year. That interaction was interesting. Another interesting matchup. This is a really intriguing game from like an on-paper matchup perspective because Vanderbilt, we have the much more experienced team, the much more physical team, the much more, 11 seniors. That's always huge. We might be peaking right at this point. It's so interesting to see that team compete against some great district teams. We lost to Assumption. We came up short against South Lafourche. So hungry for a win against a great district team in Ellender. And then you have Ellender. Young, only one player from the 2017 team still there, in Tanisha Hester. Lots of youth, but lots of talent still. And the matchups were interesting. Tanisha, their big man, or big woman anyway, versus Rebecca Lawrence for us. And she had to play with beyond Tanisha the whole time. Tanisha's a little bit bigger. Rebecca had to stay on her. And she did decently well throughout the game, and she did well enough. We had the lead for the majority of the game. It was back and forth. Usually, like for a large section of the second and third quarter, we were up 1, down 1, up 1, down 1, up 1, down 1. We spread out to 3 in the fourth, up 35-32, and then Ellender makes a big run. They end up going up by 6, 41-35, and they never look back. We end up losing by that same margin of 6, 49-43. So it's an unfortunate loss, but I think there's a lot more to the future of this potential rivalry than there was previous years. Ellender is a state powerhouse of a program in girls basketball. And we played hard. Ellender's a great team, but we went out and gave them everything we had, and there is nothing to be ashamed of. And I want to make this point. That's the 3rd game I've watched this season from the girls that has been nothing short of incredibly entertaining. And that is something, even if we don't come up with wins in those games, that's something that fans will come back to, and they are in droves, and I think they will the next time we have our home game in a couple of weeks. We don't have any this week, but I think that is huge for girls basketball, and it has been fun to watch. It's one of the most entertaining seasons I've seen, even if we're not a state championship contender, and I don't know if we are or not this year. It's still fun, and that is just as important as being elite, because it's a very good team. It's even a great team. But it is a fun team to watch, and I think that's really important. Moving on to the boys' team, we did not quite have the same success against Ellender. They have a sophomore who's like 6'6", and he dropped 25, and then another player dropped 25. We ended up losing by 40. Not nearly as much to talk about there. Hopefully we can bounce back from that in a big game against South Terrebonne on Monday. That's it for the review for this week. I'll move on to the preview of all the events for next week. I'm going to quickly address boys soccer and the games that aren't the Brother Martin game here. I'm not going to talk about it really. I don't have anything to add from what Ryan said back in the interview at the beginning of the episode. Girls soccer, also not much to talk about. Again, similar to what I said in the review, it's just district games that they should be winning by a lot, and they have been winning by a lot. So, yeah, not much else to say. Basketball is really where some of these interesting matchups are. We have South Terrebonne on Tuesday. I mentioned it for both teams already. And it's a really big bounce-back game for both teams, boys and girls, in 2 very different ways. The girls had a very emotional, close loss against a great Ellender team, and we're looking to bounce back against a still very good girls South Terrebonne team. Again, they were top 20 last year. The boys are coming off of a different kind of emotional loss. We got blown out. And after 4 straight close losses against, again, St. Charles, East St. John, Point Capite, South Lafourche, to have that kind of loss is devastating. We've fallen to 4-19 as a team, and it's the best 4-19 team I've ever seen. I was here my freshman year doing the film for a 3-28 boys basketball team. We are nothing like that. We shouldn't be a stone's throw away from that. We are way better than that team. We've been working way harder than that team, and we've improved so much since then. And this team does not deserve to be this bad record-wise. We have, I think, 9 different single-digit losses this season, which this early on in the season you just don't see. You don't see 9 of your 19 losses be that close from any team. So for the boys, this is a big game for you. Bounce back, a big bounce-back game for the boys basketball team. A chance to win against a team. South Terrebonne does not have that same success. That the girls' team does. The boys' team doesn't have that same success. Excuse me. And we had, one interesting thing from this is we already played this season in the Jamboree back in November. That game was a tie. So it'll be interesting to see just how different the addition of the football players and how much those 2 teams have changed from November now to January. So best of luck, of course, to the team. Huge chance for a bounce-back game for both the boys and the girls. The Assumption game on Friday is a little bit different. For the girls, it is a big chance for us. Assumption, of course, is a great girls basketball team, going to be one of the teams that's contending for district, along with everyone else other than maybe Morgan City. Everyone's going to be contending for district. Yes, we have 3 losses, but we still can play a huge part in this, and we still can beat any team that we play. So it's a big game at Assumption. We already lost to them earlier on in the season at home, just last week. But we can go there and have a chance to spoil them. They already have 1 loss on the season. If we can give them a second, we can still claw back into this with 3 losses. Everyone has to play everyone twice. So we'll see just how that goes. Finally, for the boys, it's not quite the same story. I don't want to go into a game saying that it's not winnable. That's really pessimistic. But Assumption is somewhere along the lines of like 25-0 right now. They're a state championship contender. I hate, like, the Ellender game, I guess a little bit tangential here, but the Ellender game was very winnable. Ellender's not the same team they were last year, but we just didn't go out and do it. This game feels a little bit different. Assumption, they're great. Now, that's not to say that we can't go out there and try to compete our best and play our best and improve a lot from the game. I'm just saying that I can't favor us, at the very least. Assumption's a great team. I think we have a lot of potential, and maybe we can go out and do something that'd be great, and maybe pull a big upset. We'll see. But if we do end up getting a victory, it would be a huge upset. I think everyone outside of Vanderbilt is seeing this as a favored win for Assumption. That's just how it is. Now we have a chance. That's why we play the games. We have a great chance to go out there and prove something against an elite team in Assumption. But they are favored. That's about the only thing that everyone will take from this game going into it. But the best of luck to us, both in the South Terrebonne and the Assumption games for both the boys and the girls. The final thing I want to address, the main event for the episode, is the Brother Martin game. I'm going to be somewhat quick with this. Brother Martin, I talked about it before, that's why I'll be brief. I don't usually have JV games on Terrier Talk very often. I usually just talk about varsity for the sake of brevity. If I included every JV and every junior high game, it would be an hour-long episode every single time. And this episode's already going to probably cross 50 minutes. Maybe not. We'll see. We'd have 1 more minute to go. And also, thank you real quick to all the 6 people that have been staying with me throughout all this. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Enjoyed this episode, and I've enjoyed all the viewer interaction. So, main event against Brother Martin. It's at Brother Martin on Monday, and it is a JV game. And I think this JV game is huge. I talked about it with Ryan. It is really important for the ramifications and the future of both programs and the entire state. Brother Martin is maybe not the number 1 seed, but is the favorite right now to win Division I and we're the favorite and the number 1 seed to win Division 3, even if some doubters notwithstanding. And we have a chance to show that we're not just the best team in the division, but the best team in the state in the future for years to come. We have some great 8th graders, some great freshmen, some great sophomores, and of course, Brother Martin's always going to be loaded. But this is a chance to prove that in the future we are elite, not just good, not just great, but elite. That's the chance tomorrow at Brother Martin. That is what is at stake. Even if there is no varsity record going into it, that is what matters. And I wish those boys that are out there playing that game the best of luck there, because that game is important. Even if it's not varsity, I think it is worth talking about. So I'll see you. I hope they can come out with a victory, and I hope everyone who competes for Vanderbilt this week does the same. And I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next week, same time, same channel. I will see you then. Excuse me.